Now to Syria, which is marking a year since the overthrow of half a century of brutal dictatorship. Thousands have taken to the streets and a military parade has been held in the capital, Damascus, to celebrate the moment when former President Bashar al-Assad was deposed by Islamist rebels. His regime fell to a lightning offensive led by current President Ahmad al-Sharaa. Now, it was hoped the end of Syria's 14-year civil war would bring relief and a measure of prosperity to the country. But rebuilding has barely started. DW's Mohamad Chreyteh returned to the ruined town of Daraya on the outskirts of Damascus and sent this report.
A year ago, these streets were filled with hope that the fall of the Assad regime would mark a new beginning. But almost 12 months later, Daraya still lies in ruins.
This town was home to more than 200,000 people. Government airstrikes tore it to pieces during the civil war. And although that government is gone, here the future feels uncertain. We came here and met Jamal Bayraktar a year ago, just after the government fell. This is what his home and salt factory looked like then. Coming back now, nothing has changed.
I cannot rebuild the factory. I can't repair my house either. I can't even afford to install a window. I'm broke. I have nothing.
Why is there no rebuilding?
No one is helping. If you have your own money, it's possible to rebuild, but otherwise not. And I don't have money.
The basement Jamal showed us last year, the site of mass killings during the war, remains untouched. The air still feels thick with dust and grief.
The government promised rebuilding and accountability, but here in Daraya, the past still sits in plain sight, and the future feels far away.
Jamal's neighbor, Isa al-Jassim, tells stories of loss and of waiting. He says the war is over, but peace has not yet arrived.
I witnessed the massacres here, and I buried two of the victims here on my land, my two cousins. I buried them here behind me. There has still not been any accountability. We have absolutely no information that the criminals were arrested or brought to justice.
Like most of his neighbors who are still in Daraya, Isa lives in his destroyed roofless home. Across Syria, reconstruction is piecemeal and has barely begun. The economy is collapsing. Inflation is soaring, putting the cost of rebuilding beyond reach for many. At 64, Jamal works as a gardener to survive.
I am working for my children. Why would I do it otherwise? I do all this only for them. That's it.
1 year after the fall of Assad, people in Daraya is still waiting for the bulldozers, the builders, and a new beginning.
Well, that report from our Beirut Bureau Chief, Mohamad Chreyteh, who joins us now from the Syrian capital, Damascus. Welcome, Mohamad. Let's start with today's celebrations. How is the a year since the fall of Assad being marked there?
Yeah, for the many Syrians who are celebrating what is officially today the Liberation Day, they're celebrating, they say, a year without Bashar al-Assad, a year without massacres, a year without chemical attacks. These are the main slogans hanging in the streets and on walls on state buildings. Damascus have had a sleepless night yesterday. Syrians have been taking the streets, roving the streets with their cars, waving the new Syrian flags and dancing and chanting in the public squares, in main highways. These celebrations went ongoing until the early hours of the morning when they joined the morning prayer following calls by the interim President Ahmad al-Sharaa, who himself showed up in the morning prayers and delivered a speech calling for unity and calling for Syrians to celebrate today. As you can see behind me, this is the epicenter of the celebrations today. This is the iconic Umayyad Square. Thousands of Syrians are still arriving here to celebrate. A big stage has been set up over there Many events have been happening down there. The military parade was over a few minutes ago, and many other events will be ongoing until late tonight.
And what sort of leader has the interim president been in that time?
Well, as far as we can tell, Ahmad al-Sharaa went through a very significant and remarkable transition from an ex-jihadist, an ex-al-Qaeda commander, to a pragmatic politician ruling a very complex country, a very diverse society. Now, in the eyes of Syrians, the image of Ahmad al-Sharaa really depends on who you ask. Like, for instance, among the Muslim Sunnis, who form 70 to 80% of Syria's population, is getting a lot of support. They love him, they do support him and his government and his rule. But if you dig deeper, ask Christians, for instance, ask the majority of Jews, of Kurds, of Alawites, they have raised concerns on his Islamist background, and they have raised fears because of what they say are ideologists and radicals in Ahmad al-Sharaa's entourage and within the close circle of decision making. So there's a lot that needs to happen to bring Syrians together and peacefully. These fears from minorities were fueled by sectarian clashes and violence, including mass killings that happened throughout the year. So a lot needs to happen to bring Syrians together under one flag.
You talked about the former president's entourage. We know that Assad fled to Russia. What about other members of his regime? Are they being held accountable and being seen to be held accountable?
Well, we know that there are efforts from the interim government to bring those people to accountability and establish courts and, try to solve the issues of those who went missing, tens of thousands who went missing during more than 13 years of civil war. But we hear from Syrians that this is not happening in the pace that they would want to see. And to be honest, this is a process that needs so many resources. And for instance, there have been they found, like the new authorities found multiple mass graves across the country, but this needs a lot of resources, a lot of money and personnel and expertise to bring to excavate these bodies and do DNA tests and put end to this file. But Syria does not have the resources to do so far.
Thanks for talking us through that, Mohamad. DW's Mohamad Chreyteh in Damascus. Well, Sarah Easter is Emergency Communications Officer for the aid organisation Care International. She's recently returned from northern Syria and joins us now from Berlin. Welcome to DW. Tell us about the impressions and encounters that have stayed with you most from your trip.
I think the encounters I remember most are the ones with the people that I met there. So I've been to many camps where people are still displaced because they cannot afford to rebuild their homes and cannot go back to their villages and to their cities. And I talked to an elderly woman, for example, who in every single winter, she sits there with a spoon to break the ice of her water barrel because it's frozen in her tent. It gets that cold in her tent. I also talked to a 16-year-old girl who just recently came back from Turkey, and she says now she's starting school again in her village, but the school books have not been printed yet, so she's writing her exams without even have read the material. And there's so many people that cannot afford to even buy drinking water or to pay for the electricity bill, and many people that are living in poverty.
So people are returning to Syria to try and rebuild their lives, but clearly the country is not yet up to it. And we've seen across the day that very little of Syria's ruined buildings and infrastructure have been rebuilt. Why does so little appear to have happened in the last year?
I mean, there's many people, as I said, that still live in tents, and they told me they can't even afford to buy the next meal or to survive a winter and keep warm in the winter. So they don't have the means to rebuild their houses. So I talked to a man who recently returned and had to look of what is left over of his house. And he said he couldn't even find the place where he used to live because the streets are completely destroyed. And I saw so many neighborhoods where there's only rubble left over, and that is just a massive destruction there, but people still live inside of this rubble. You can still see the washing line hanging there with children's clothes hanging out there to dry. And the need is really big, and the people need support to rebuild their houses. And if they can't even afford the next meal or to buy something to keep warm during the winter, then how should they rebuild their homes? So that will take a long time to rebuild these cities and for the people to go back to something that is reflective of something like an infrastructure.
And as far as you can tell, though, is there a plan? Is there a plan to rebuild the roads and houses and infrastructure?
Definitely. I mean, if you go past all these buildings and villages, you can see construction works going on everywhere. But that is something that people that have the money to afford something like that to rebuild their houses. We're looking at a time right now where the funding for humanitarian aid in Syria has gone down dramatically. So we are seeing a phenomenon right now that people are fleeing again, not because of bombs or because of the conflict. They are fleeing because they don't get the support that they need. They don't get the aid that they need. And that's why I've talked to so many people. They say, we live here in a camp. We don't know how to afford our next meal. And now also NGOs are having to end projects. So CARE as well. We are looking at a financial situation right now and a funding cut and a lack of attention for the people in Syria. So this is something we need to scale that up. We need to scale up funding for these projects and for the people in Syria. Otherwise, reconstructing infrastructures and complete neighborhoods will be something that will take a lot longer time.
And amongst all this devastation, I guess that the health system is collapsed as well. So when people need help, what is there for them?
So CARE has a hospital that we fund, and it's one of the last remaining hospitals in the region in northern Syria, an hour from Aleppo. And I talked to a mother there who was in the midst of delivering twins. So she said at 6 a.m. She was starting delivery, and then she just had to rush from hospital to hospital. But because of the funding cuts in humanitarian aid and because of the system is slowly collapsing right now, hospitals have closed. So in the area, there's 40 hospitals already who have closed. 50 other medical facilities had to shut down. And those that are still there, they don't have the capacity to take people in anymore. All staff has been completely gone. So there's no doctors there in these facilities. So this woman, she was just rushing from hospital to hospital, was standing in front of closed doors. And then finally at 9 a.m., she found the hospital that CARE is funding. And she says, like, my twins would have died if I would not have found that hospital. At 9:15, the twins were already there. And the doctors in that hospital told me that it happens 2 to 3 times a month that there are women delivering their babies on the street because they did not reach a facility in time. So this is a catastrophe that we're looking at. So if funding is failing and is being cut further, then this is what we're looking at. Mothers delivering babies on the streets or at home. And then there will be also an increase of maternal and also neonatal mortality.
OK, thanks for that snapshot of the situation there in northern Syria. Sarah Easter from CARE, Germany.
Well, for more, I'm joined now by Kristin Helberg. She is a journalist and author. She is an expert on Syria, a familiar face to our viewers. It's good to have you back on the program. Let me ask you, 1 year after the fall of the Assad regime, is this new government, is it firmly in control of Syria?
It is not fully in control of Syria. We have still in the northeast an area that is controlled by Kurdish autonomy. We have areas in the south where the Druze militias are controlling parts of the southern province of Chreyteh. It very much depends the judgment of the new authorities of how you look at Ahmad al-Sharaa himself. Do you view him as a national hero who liberated Syria from the Assad rule, or do you see him as a potential dictator, an Islamist dictator even? So everything he does, everything he says, or the measures that he has taken over the year can be seen as, one step in the right direction, or maybe just a further indicator that he is not interested in democracy. So that makes it very complicated. And whomever you ask in Syria, you will get a different answer depending on how these people view his person.
Kristin, let me put you on the spot here. I mean, how do you assess his leadership so far?
The problem I see is that he has an authoritarian vision and a centralized vision of how to lead Syria, which is not what's going to lead to a pluralistic democracy here. But still, it is probably quite representative of what the people in Syria feel. After more than 50 years of authoritarian rule, people are not very much used to political debates. They rely on a strong leader. Maybe they feel this is the right alternative in this situation. And we are talking about a transitional period. The whole question is, will he be ready in 3 to 5 years to hold democratic elections and to include everybody and to guarantee the security of all the citizens, which is questioned by a lot of people, especially Alawites, Druze, Kurds, for example, and even some Christians.
We talked many times about the shock of what happened a year ago. People said for years that Bashar al-Assad was there to stay. What specifically did the world misread about the durability of his regime?
It was from inside, it was not stable. It was not toppled from the outside, but it disintegrated from within. So it was built on fear. It was built on a shell in the end. It was not really consistable. And people who supported him were in the end not ready to fight for him to stay there. So in the end, it disintegrated himself from inside, and he left the country. So this is basically why it was that quick, and nobody foresaw this, within 11 days. But this is because it was not toppled from outside. But as I said, even nobody was ready within the military, within the secret services, within, the Mohamad to really defend Bashar al-Assad.
He now lives in exile in Moscow. How realistic do you think it is that he will ever have to face accountability for the crimes that were committed in Syria during his rule?
It does not seem very probable right now with Vladimir Putin being in power in Moscow, although accountability is really what needs to be dealt with if you want to build the future of Syria, because all the crimes that have been committed have to be brought to justice, because what we see right now is that people start to take justice into their own hands. As long as they don't have the feeling of justice and that people are brought to court or to trial for what they have done, people will continue to kill people, security officers. We have this is going on. People are being held accountable. And this is not a viable way to stabilize Syria. The good news is we have a lot of experts on accountability. You have NGOs, Syrian NGOs, you have international human rights organizations, we have mechanisms within the UN, we have 2 commissions that were set up in Damascus for the forcibly disappeared, for transitional justice. So the big challenge here is to bring all these expertise and all these actors together to really work on accountability in an effective way that would finally stabilize the country.
Kristin Helberg, our expert on Syria. We appreciate your time and your valuable insights on this important day for the people of Syria. Thank you.
My pleasure.